Hi, this is Steve Bremner, and if you were a sponsor of an episode of Fire on Your Head, this is where your ad would go. If you want me to mention or promote or pretend I use your product, your ministry, or a service of yours, contact us at feedback@fireonyourhead.org, and we'll talk.
Dropping some knowledge and a little love. This is the Fire on Your Head podcast with your host, Steve Bremner. Steve Bremner, missionary to Peru and blogger at stevebremner.com. The podcast where we tackle gray areas your pastor doesn't talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Bremner.
Greetings, friends and revolutionaries. You're listening to Fire on Your Head. With me today, I got back on the podcast, Jeremy Mangerchine. I got it right this time, right?
You got it right. You nailed it.
It's because I've been practicing for half an hour before.
Wait. That's all? Only a half an hour? We'll work on that.
Yeah. So Jeremy Madagascar is with us, and the last, if you have not listened to it, and this is the first time you're listening to the show, you'll want to check out the last time I had him on the show a number of months ago. We were talking about his book, The Longest Bridge Across Water, and today it's different because not everybody I have on the podcast messages me saying, "Hey, I've got something else we should talk about on your podcast again." And Jeremy sent me a message a couple of weeks ago asking, "When's the next time we're gonna talk?" And I said, "As soon as you've got time," or something to that effect. I'd have to look at the exchange of messages, right? But Jeremy's one of my favorite guests I've had on, and you had indicated that you had something to talk about again this time, so I'm more than happy to go for it. And you're talking to me right now from your office in New Orleans, right?
That is correct.
And how is the weather down there?
Cold.
And when you say cold, are you talking under 10 feet of snow cold, or are you talking about, it's like a few degrees, lower than normal cold?
Well, when you say down there, I'm way above you, actually.
Well,
so.
you're right. I'm
Is your mind in Canada right now?
When I'm making the comparison, for the listeners' benefit, since most people listening to this are in North America,
right,
and a few Europeans, you're down there from where they are.
New Orleans is a fairly tropical climate. Winters are pretty mild. And it dips down from time to time, and right now it's dipping. The other day it was in the high 70s, low 80s, and in the last 2 days it's been, I think, in the 40s. Today it's going to be in the 50s.
And you're talking Fahrenheit.
Yes, Fahrenheit. So that's cold for us. Yeah.
For the listeners who are in the rest of the world besides America, where we use Celsius. Mm-hmm. No. Now, we have an intern who lives with us right now, and she's from Texas, and she was showing my wife, who's never seen snow for herself because she's Peruvian, she was showing her a photo of her house that had snow in front of it, and I just kind of snickered and said, "Yeah, Lily, do you want to see a picture of my house back in Canada with snow in front of it? Because that's how it looks for like 3 months of the year every year." It's like, or, I'm reading these things in my newsfeed about people having snow days in areas that are like Tennessee or areas that are significantly warmer than anything I ever grew up with, and I just get a chuckle out of it because I use cold with quotation marks, but
it's relative.
But I've been to New Orleans once about 10 years ago, and it is like Africa hot there. So I will give you that it is hot. And so if you're feeling cold, then it's justifiably so. Because
yes.
Down here it's pretty humid, and I the cold goes through you when it's winter here, which is not like a Canadian winter, but you still have to wear jacket and stuff. And anyway, so enough about the weather. I just know it's at this time of the year, there's so much going on in the world with crazy weather, and especially in North America. And so some people might be listening to this because they're stuck at home. But, okay. So, the book that you're going to talk to us about today, it's called the Quitter's Manual, or
yes.
What's the title exactly?
Yeah, the title is The Quitter's Manual: Finding Rest in a World Gone Berserk.
Right. So I latched on to rest. For some reason, I thought that I was about to say rest, the Quitter's Manual or something. And for people listening to this, what are you talking about quitting?
The title is, it's kind of a trick title in that I think as humans, a lot of times we want formula. We want the steps to get a desired result. And finding rest is all about tapping into the completed work of Christ within us. And so the Quitter's Manual is not a manual at all. Actually, it's helping you see that there is no manual, and that relational intimacy with God, discovering rest in Him is way more of a relational practice than anything else. Mm-hmm. So that's the title, and that's where it came from.
Okay. And you've piqued my interest in that. Yeah, I'm going to read it. I just haven't yet. So unlike the other time I had you on where I knew things to ask you about concerning your book.
Well, you could have read one line and pretended like you read it. But,
yeah, I could have.
But you're too honest for that.
Yeah, I could have. But I mean, I recommend books when I know to recommend them. And in your case, it's like I'm anxious to read it because I liked the other one and I know this will be good, you know? So, tell me about it. Tell me what I'm going to get out of it. Where does this come from? What kind of stuff is God speaking to you about that we can discuss and call this a podcast?
Sure. Well, actually, I can kind of start from the beginning.
Sure. You don't need to give anything away. You know, I know you want people to read the book still, but.
Oh, I'll tell them all. Okay. I don't mind. You go buy the book, don't buy the book. We'll still be friends. But no, actually, I like my first book. The Quitter's Manual really was never intended to be a book. The first book and a lot of the things that I talk about in relating with God, walking in intimacy with Him, hearing His voice, walking in healing power, receiving prophetic words, all of those things. You call it supernatural, call it whatever. I would get questions about that, and you remember the movie Karate Kid?
Yes. Which one? The good one or the recent one?
I didn't know there was a recent one there. I think they're on Karate Kid 25 now, but we'll go with the very first one.
Yeah, okay.
And you remember Daniel came into town. He moved in town. He was picked on. He was, kind of a scrawny guy, couldn't really defend himself.
Yeah.
The bullies were going at him. And he, by chance, got connected with Mr. Miyagi, and he somehow knew that Mr. Miyagi was well-versed in the art of karate and fighting. So he was able to talk Mr. Miyagi into tutoring him and mentoring him. And immediately what he found once he started meeting with Mr. Miyagi was that Mr. Miyagi wasn't going to teach him how to fight. He was going to teach him how to do slave labor. So,
right.
So he handed him a paintbrush. He said, hey, paint this fence. Use this hand motion up and down and up and down. He handed him a sponge and said, hey, wax my classic car. Wax on, wax off. Everybody knows wax on, wax off, right?
Wax off.
That's right. And he renamed him Daniel-san. So Daniel-san, gets a little jaded, gets frustrated. Why is this guy teaching me manual labor when I want to learn how to fight, when I want to learn how to defend myself? Because after all, he was going to face his nemesis in the ring in a tournament. And as the movie progresses towards the end, towards the climax, Daniel-san is in the ring or on the mat, whatever, and he's getting beat down once again. He's laying down on the mat. He's able to regain the strength to lift himself up, and as he does, he has a flashback to all the movements that he learned from Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off, and he taps into that, kicks his nemesis, knocks him out, wins the fight, gets the girl. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that is my approach to teaching people the supernatural, okay? It's the Mr. Miyagi way. It's the Mr. Miyagi art of teaching and mentoring people. It's that.
That's going to be the title of this podcast. You just gave it to me right there.
Yeah, no problem.
No problem. Mr. Miyagi way.
That's it. Of learning the supernatural. It's like we all want the boom, bang, pow, explosive life. And it's totally possible. We are supernatural beings that are one with God. The crazy thing, though, is tapping into that power within us, tapping into the person of God within us, happens through rest. And so that's how God tricked me, in a sense. And I don't mean that to make God sound manipulative. What that means is God is wise in how he teaches us. And he taught me in a wise way how to tap into rest early on, because then that basically clears the channels in order to flow from an infinite source of divine flow, of power, of hearing his voice clearly, of seeing visions or whatever it is. And it's all about discovering rest. So what happened was I started getting a lot of questions, and my answer was always somewhat simple, because it
questions
all boiled
about what?
You name it, specifically about hearing the voice of God, how to walk in the prophetic, things like that. And I also talked a little bit about rest in the first book, and people would say, well, what is that? And so I would answer the question over and over again. And admittedly, I'm a little bit of a lazy person, meaning I don't like doing the same thing over and over and over again. I love connecting with people, but I just found that typing a document of an answer that was pretty much the same every time and just pointing people to it would probably be the easiest way and most efficient use of my time. So I kind of typed it out, and I realized it was a book, and I was going to give it away for free because I promised a lot of people that I would answer the questions. So I gave it away free up front because I wanted to be true to my word and kind of hold up my end of the bargain. And so I did. And so the book it starts out with how I discovered rest. And then it kind of takes you through what is rest, how to live from rest. Essentially, what the book teaches you first, basically teaches you four things. It teaches you what is rest, how to enter into rest, how to live a life of consistent rest, and how to re-enter rest when you find yourself slipping back into chaos. So essentially, the world in the subtitle, finding rest in a world gone berserk, right? The world is getting faster and faster and faster with technology, with just the busyness of life. It's getting more chaotic, but we don't necessarily have to be subject to the whims of the chaos, right? As kingdom people, as people who are one with God, really, it's our inheritance to live a life of mastery, inner mastery, and not subservient to the flick of outer inputs that come our way and desire to get us spinning because of the flick. And we begin to spin and spin and spin and spiral and spiral and spiral. And before we know it, we feel stressed out. We feel chaotic. We feel far from God. And when the reality is there's no such thing as being far from God, right? He never separates himself from us. We're eternally one with him. And so realizing rest is about realizing in any given moment your complete oneness with God and the fact that there is no separation from him. That's impossible. Right. And realizing that all of the stress, all the chaos, all the fear, all that stuff, those are external invading mindsets and thought processes.
Right. Well, you know what's interesting is recently we've had, I'm not joking, and maybe there's people listening to this that are in kind of more ghetto areas of the world than I am. We've had about 5 brownouts in the last month. Mm-hmm. And where we live, we have the power go out at least once a month. and for at least 1 hour. So sometimes it's 4 or 5 hours. And less than a month ago, we got a notification that we needed to, we got a notification ahead of time that we would have no power from 9 a.m. to 4 in the afternoon or something. So it's like we had to plan, what are we going to do without the electricity? That means no internet. That means we can't just put on Baby Einstein on the TV for our daughter. Or we can't. And it was just amazing to think of how in all these occasions where we're getting unplugged from the stuff we would distract ourselves with, how hard it was sometimes on some occasions, especially when it would happen without notice.
Right.
But when there is notice, it's not a big deal. But when it would just, because the other times it just happens randomly. What did they do when they didn't have their laptop or tablet or these things to tap into? And I sat down, on our couch the other night when the power went out, put on my Kindle Paperwhite, and I just started reading something scriptural, and I thought, why don't I sit down and tune out of all these things around me more often? Why do I need the power to cut off? Why do I need circumstances around me to force me into this? It's like, this is so much, it's so enjoyable. Why do I have to kind of discipline myself to do this? And we talked like that last time you were on about, when you're enjoying that relationship and go into that source, you don't need discipline to do it. It's just kind of like you have a different drive. And I admit to falling into a bit of a trap in recent weeks where I think it's like 5 times we've had the power go out, and 4 of those times it really irked me, in terms of whatever I needed to do. And, and so I'm finding it interesting that like you said, we're just getting more and more of this stuff in our lives. You know what I mean? Like, I'm down here in Peru, and I still have all the technology and things like that, crappy internet, but still have the ways of distracting myself. And I forget where I was going with that thought.
That's all right. I will save you. Don't worry.
Right.
No. Yeah, I love technology. Isn't that from Napoleon Dynamite? There's a song, I Love Technology.
I can't remember. It's been
maybe
like
you could
10
splice that in.
Yes, I love technology, but not as much as you see. But I still love technology, always and forever.
Right.
No, technology is great. I utilize it a lot, and I plan on utilizing it more. It's a wonderful gift. How we approach it is the very important thing that we need to be mindful of.
Right.
I've found that there's less and less mindfulness about really our approach to anything, including our thought processes. But approaching technology from a standpoint of receiving life and addiction and things like that are far different from seeing it as a tool and using it for our benefit and for the benefit of others. It's a heart condition. You can't really judge it from the outside. It really only the person and God know what it is. And you talked about silence. I hated silence, man. I was addicted to noise. I was addicted to all of that stuff for really my whole life. And all this came to a head a handful of years ago. I was medicated for high blood pressure. I'm a very type A person. So when I talk about rest, don't hear me say that I'm some Zen type guy that's, naturally inclined to be a monk in a cave somewhere. No, not at all. I'm a type A go-getter type of guy. And I was high strung. I was overwhelmed, and I hated silence. And like I said, the repercussions were stress induced high blood pressure. And
But you're normally a pretty healthy guy. At least from every photo of you I've seen, you're in clearly good shape,
Well, healthy and in good shape are two different things.
Okay.
That we could go down that rabbit trail.
Well, continue
okay.
the thought you're on,
Okay. Yeah. And so God came to me when I first began to become awakened by him. And when I first really intimately began to get to know the Holy Spirit, one of the first things he did in that period of time was, I was driving home from work one afternoon across a very, very long bridge. It's called The Longest Bridge Across Water. That's where the title of my first book came from. But I had this encounter where I was listening to a message in my ears of it's probably some prophet guy or some teacher. And externally, God comes swooping in my car from the top right side, from outside, and says, "Turn it off." and I do this thing where when someone says something to me and I don't fully comprehend what they said and I'm not really sure, I pause for a second. Sometimes I say, "What was that?" In this case, I didn't say that because I was kind of caught off guard. And this was different than the kind of what we describe as the still small internal voice of God flowing from within you. This was a visitation of, and it was external. And so he repeated it again a second time when I didn't hear and I didn't, cooperate. And he wasn't being mean. He wasn't being unloving or ungracious, but he was very adamant that I, cooperated. And so again, he said, "Turn it off." And at that time I got it. I was like, okay, well, I'll go ahead and turn off this message about God, and how about I listen to God, right? So,
right.
So I turned it off, and he began to speak very rapidly. I'm driving 65, 70 miles per hour over this bridge, and I'm trying to look for something to write down what he's saying, right? Because I didn't want to lose this. I didn't want to miss this. So I had a stack of business cards in the kind of console next to my hand. So I picked that up and I pull a pen out of my pocket. I put the business card on the steering wheel and I'm trying to dictate what he's saying. And so I'd quickly fill one up and I'd kind of like just throw it aside and do another one and do another one. I still have the cards. It's great. And so he told me a lot of things, but the very last thing that he said was what drove everything home, and it was the main point that he was trying to make. And he said, "Jeremy, it is imperative that you learn how to rest." Okay? Now, Steve, at this time, I hadn't read the scriptures in Hebrews about rest. I knew nothing about what I do now about rest, nothing. So my response was, "God, do you mean like a vacation?" And his response was, "I'll show you." Then shoop, he sucked back up from where he came, from the top right side of the car. Encounter over. Wow. Okay. Yeah, here's a really cool thing about God that and he tends to do this with me. When I read scripture, I see that he did this with a lot of other people. But I call it backwards revelation. Like sometimes, more like a lot of times, God allows us to experience things, or he pulls us into things and gives us this encounter or this experience prior to giving us the understanding of what we experienced. And that scares a lot of people because It kind of takes the control out of our hands. And really, I mean, that can lead to, bad teachings and things like that. I get that. I really, really get that. But God does that very regularly with me. And like I said, I see it pretty consistently in scripture with a lot of his people. So fast forward to the beginning of him showing me what I experienced, because he took me into that time in the car, but it still took a little while for me to understand what it meant. And I'd almost forgotten about it until one morning before work, there was a friend that I would get together with once a week, and we would kind of go through some things, spiritual things and talk and things like that. And he had the suggestion, let's do 20 minutes of sitting still and quiet with the Lord, not praying, not doing anything, not pushing out of ourselves any sort of thoughts, but just sit and rest and be in the presence of God. And remember how I told you that at that point, I'm addicted to noise, chaos, silence freaks me out, and I don't even understand why. I don't like it. I always had to have external input coming my way from somewhere. So we kick off this 20 minutes, and I'm sitting there on the sofa, and there's no other way to put it. The first 10 minutes were hell. Okay?
I can imagine.
Yeah, because sitting still and sitting quiet and just being, that's the key, is just being and realizing the fullness of God within your person is great. But the second you try to get still and try to get quiet, what I found was just how much inner chaos I traveled around with on a regular basis, because all these invasive thoughts come out of nowhere to bombard you and to take you just down a rabbit trail. You got to pay this bill. You got to say this to that person, and all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, you name it, whatever. And so after about 10 minutes of just dealing with all that foolishness, I just said, God, this is ridiculous, essentially, in different words. And I said, I give up. I don't know what I'm doing. I need you to empower me, and really you're just going to have to do this. And what I'll do on my end is I'm going to stop fighting it, and you're just going to have to take over, and I'm going to do this. So I sat there with this new sense of cooperation with God, this new sense of releasing control and allowing God to just do whatever the heck God wanted to do. And Steve, what happened was, as I sat there, before I realized it, my eyes were closed, right? So I could kind of see in the spirit. And seeing in the spirit and things like that were kind of new for me. Okay, so I hadn't really experienced a whole lot of that at this point in time in my life. And what happened is a kind of a grayish cloud began to form and come upwards from within kind of where my torso was, inside in the spirit. And this cloud, Steve, it had presence to it. It was thick. It had a feeling to it, and the feeling was peace. This feeling was almost like something I never felt before, but it was powerful, and it was almost scary at the same time. But it wasn't scaring me like I was afraid of it. It was almost as though it was scaring away the things that didn't belong there. Right. So it kept getting higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And as it got up to where my head was, like right around my neck, it was getting heavier and heavier. And I started to wonder, God, are you going to kill me? So I asked him, God, are you going to kill me?
And he said, yes. No.
Are you going to snuff me out, man? You know,
and he said,
I love you.
Don't ask questions. And he flicked you off the mountain.
That's right. Smite you. But no, actually, he didn't answer. His answer was no answer, and he kept rising. This cloud kept rising, and as it got upwards towards the top of my head and came out of my head, I didn't die. But what did happen, Steve, was that for the very first time, because I was overcome, when it came up out of my head, I felt a peace that I'd never felt before. I felt this calm that I had never felt before. It was 100% absolutely positively supernatural, and it was an experience that I'd never had before. And while he didn't kill me, it was the very first time that I had ever really realized in reality that I had died with Christ and that I was alive with him. That's the first time that I had felt that, because I mean, we know a lot of things in our mind. We know a lot of things. We were talking earlier, you called it knowledge, right? We have a lot of knowledge, but this had never become experiential knowledge for me. It hadn't been tangible to me. And so that morning was the very first time I ever experienced in the true rest of God. It's the first time I'd ever tasted it, felt it, entered it. And Steve, from that moment on, I was finished, man.
Right.
I was finished.
Well, I want to jump in here if I can. And I wrote down a couple of words, and I've basically heard you not only say each one of them, but like emphasize them. Peace, for one thing. And I wrote down here, peace paves the way. And and that's kind of like this thing for me, between me and God, when I've got things that are preoccupying me. I got things that maybe there's something that would cause me to be stressed out. And instead of just kind of having peace and tapping into that, like you're talking about that Miyagi and Daniel tapping into, it's like instead of tapping into that, I'm like a hamster running on a wheel, trying to kind of solve some problems, thinking with knowledge that, yeah, this is how I'm going to solve this problem. God's going to bless this. When really lacking peace is like an obstacle it's basically blocking that channel with which I can tap into and hear from God what he would have me do about a situation. And sometimes peace is all you need. Having calm, having that peace. And you also talked about just being. And I'll throw this word at you: abiding. I've got my Kindle open to John 15, because in our ministry we value and we emphasize and encourage rest, not just having peace and being at calm, but rest in terms of like actually having a day off. That we work from a place of rest, and we don't rest from work, and I don't want to sidetrack a little bit from what you're saying, but I really felt like I wanted to totally hammer on that abiding. I've had a couple of guys I work with down here, Sean Wisman and Mark Burgess. We did a podcast. I think the last time I actually did a podcast with the two of them, we talked about abiding. We talked about John 15. We talked about I think it was called, like, are you productive or just busy? Because you can be busy like a hamster running on the wheel, but it doesn't mean you're actually productive. It doesn't mean you're producing fruit. What's the trick to being fruitful? Abiding in him. Like a piece of fruit on a tree doesn't do anything in itself to accomplish anything. It just hangs on to the branch. It's just connected to the vine, right?
Right.
And like, so for example, like in our ministry, when we're helping students or helping people in our team come up with their schedule, we begin with the day off. When we look at the schedule, what kind of things are going on? Okay, what would be the best day off for this person to take? And then fill it in from there, right?
Right.
And I've heard different people talk about how, I haven't had a vacation in years. I haven't had I don't take weeks off, or I don't take, I don't have a day off. The gospel, that people are going to hell. There needs to, who has time to have a day off? And it's like, and how many people do you hear about burnout and stuff like this, in the ministry? And so, I think it's been years since I've really felt like I've been overloaded or stressed, but that doesn't mean I've not neglected or struggled with maintaining peace and maintaining that posture of rest, like you're talking about, right? Like I go through waves where I have to kind of recalibrate and get back to it. And so I'm appreciating hearing this part of your story again, with regard to like God kind of yanking your chain and getting your attention, because he doesn't always do that. Would you say? Like he doesn't, he might invite us or encourage us to listen to that still small voice. And how many of us, quench that and keep doing whatever we're doing, keep on listening to that preaching? Or maybe, people listening to this, they drive to work and they listen to a preaching or something, or listen to this podcast for all I know, and God's saying, turn that off and spend time with me. And it's like, nah, no thanks. No, but like how many people, in your position have had God trying to do that and don't do it, and make it harder and harder to hear that and to tap into that. Kind of rambling in a few different directions, but the word abiding really jumped out at me when I think of your book title, and you use the word being, because in Spanish the word abiding is permanecer, and it's very similar to just being. You know?
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. And really that's what the book is about, because
Great. I can't wait to read it then. You know?
it teaches people the secrets, because it's not a formula, but there are principles to be awakened within us. Now, I do address taking a day off, and I do address that. Now, I do believe there's a different natural rest and relaxation. I do believe it's good to get 8 hours of sleep if you can.
Oh yeah.
I'm with you on all that. Take a Sabbath, do it. Like, that's a great thing. Build that into your life. Absolutely, unequivocally. It's very, very necessary. So don't hear me say that that's not important.
Right.
But the rest that this book is about supernatural rest.
Right.
It's about tapping into the completed work of Jesus Christ and our completion in Him. Because
right.
really, because of what He did, we have an infinite source of life to draw from, and that is His life within us. And so this is to help lead people into that. It doesn't negate natural rest.
Right. I didn't want to emphasize what I'm talking about with natural rest to like contradict what you're saying. I just felt like that's what I know people, students in our school from the jungle who come here, and then interns we've had. At the moment we have 4 different interns, and one lives with us. And one thing I've noticed is every time somebody new or somebody who's not been a part of our work comes for the first time, the hardest thing I see, like 80% of the time, is always slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in both what you and I are talking about, spiritually and naturally. You know, people who, don't get enough sleep, who need to be busy, but aren't necessarily and I run into this a lot in our ministry because, some people don't have money, or they don't, I mean, a lot of people we know don't have money. I'm just gonna be honest. And,
right.
And so they think that like, I have to do something. I have to get a job. I have to work. I have to be busy. And then they're not hearing from God, or they're making, they make rash decisions. You know, one thing, half of our leadership time together to solve things is the consequences of rash decisions people have made around us,
Sure.
Which would be solved from, having that supernatural peace. And being able to kind of, tap into like letting God be able to say to you, turn that off. Don't go here. You know what I mean? And I think the two go hand in hand. And, I'm not saying that you don't think so. I think that they're so intertwined that, sorry, I'm going to edit that part out. They're so intertwined that, you can be resting naturally, but that doesn't mean you're tapping into that supernatural rest either. And vice versa, you can, I would say, because I've experienced God's grace in this, and you could be wearing yourself out in the natural and not taking time off, and God will still let you tap into this,
That's exactly right. And I use that example in the book because God taught me to rest in the most stressful and overwhelmed point of my life. And what happened was as he taught me how to operate in that rest and how to realize that rest, not just in that time in the morning, because I did do that regularly and I still do it regularly now. I do meditate regularly. It's not about a method and it's not about a formula, but that does benefit me. But it's about realizing our completeness in Him anytime, anywhere. And see, what happens is as we begin to walk in that, our circumstances might not change. The busyness around us, I mean, for people, like for me, I was in the corporate world and I worked a job that I was really far outside of my skill set, doing administrative things with a lot of responsibilities that, frankly, I had no business doing because I'm the furthest thing from an administrative person, dealing spreadsheets and all this stuff. I mean, I don't know how I managed it, but that didn't change. But what changed was me, God.
Right.
Everything slowed down. Everything, and it's you can slow down inside in the midst of a busy world. And that's the cool thing about tapping into supernatural rest, is because it's for anybody and everybody. It doesn't matter You don't have to go live in a cave somewhere to be Zen and be at one with God.
Right.
You know, it's for
monastery.
people. Yeah, it's for people with busy lives. It's for, you know, it's for attorneys and doctors and everybody. I mean, really, that's the natural inner life of a kingdom person. Really, that's that inner stillness in the midst of busyness. That's how Jesus operated. That's how we're going to operate. And, you know, you talk about, I know you love healing, right? I mean, healing's a big thing for you, and it is for me too. And it's really awesome how, as I learned how to walk in rest with God, it's crazy how much more the electricity would flow down my arm into someone else's body, and I could feel it like a bolt of, you know, energy coming out of my arm and hitting someone else and then being healed, you know, because I was able to cooperate and get out of the way and let God flow. Right. And it's funny to see how, as we learn to basically quit, that we can do so much more. And that's a big part of my message. And I'm actually working on another book, because one of the things I do, and I actually do in my everyday life a lot, is to help people who are doers. You see, it's like this funnel that God takes us through, because I believe with everything in me that as co-creators who are one with God, we're created to do really, really, really awesome things, and to build things, and to create things, and to make things happen. And it's imperative, though, that in order to do that, and to do it without burning out, to do it and to tap into the mind of Christ within us, we need to learn how to rest. Mm-hmm. so that we can then do things that are far greater than we could ever do apart from it. So it's not just quit and forever never do anything again. It's quit so you can do so much more.
Right.
But it's from a place where you're drawing from an infinite supply of everything.
And do you know what's interesting? Like you're saying, it's not about quitting, so to speak, and never doing anything again. But do you notice how, like, in God's economy or in God's kingdom, it's like it's always kind of backwards from how we would think something needs to be done. Like, if we're going to be more productive, we need to slow down. It's like, instead of speeding up and doing more and adding a bunch more hours to us, it's like he says, nope, you have to cut back. You know, it's like you want the tree to bear more fruit. It's like you got to prune it. You know, like, I mean, obviously people who are gardeners are like, that's not really backwards, that's normal. But
right.
But just like the idea, right, that, okay, you want this tree to have more fruit, cut a few branches off. And it's like, okay, but then the remaining branches, all the energy, all the stuff that goes up through its branches, those ones produce like bigger, I don't know, grapes, or I know grapes don't grow on trees. But it's like the stuff that does get focused on is getting better focus in the tree, right? And it can be easy to think, well, if I lack in this, I need to do more. And God could be saying, nope, stop completely. Okay, now go. And everything fits into line and stuff. And I think, I know a lot of pastors and leaders of that nature listen to this podcast. And I think for that reason, I'm saying it this way, it can be very easy to like, to get stuck on that hamster wheel and think, okay, I see the carrot, I need to keep running, but it's like, I'm not getting there. Okay, but God says, okay, no, this whole thing is wrong. Get off that hamster wheel, slow down. Here I am. Let's talk. Listen to me, you know, and you'll have a different way of doing that with each of us than the other. But there's so many ways where it's like, what would seem intrinsically foolish to us in terms of you know, like you're talking about supernatural and tapping into that Mr. Miyagi stuff. It's like God's way of doing it is usually, cut back, slow down, rather than any of these things we might be compelled to kind of run faster, not stop, add more, to the calendar to get, anyway, I'm kind of rambling on that point, but you know what I'm trying to say?
What's that?
No,
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. And I hear it. And I've learned a lot by talking to folks who are kind of in that position that you mentioned. Whether it's pastors or whatnot. And, they'll say things like, Jeremy, I love that message. And I used to be there. Or, that was great for me 20 years ago. And almost as if it's some basic elementary teaching. And, however, then what they say is, I need to tap back into that. Yeah. I'm overwhelmed. What you're saying, that is the lifeblood of everything. That is the source. That is what I miss. And you just see this look on their face. It's like, I miss that. I miss that. I miss that. And they may have more stuff, but they long for that intimacy that they tasted with God a long time ago. And that's the key thing to remember, is that people will develop. It's good. God wants us to develop. And I'm actually working on a book to help people develop and be really, really, really awesome in life.
Is that going to be the title?
That's a great title. Be really, really, really awesome in life. No, I'm vacillating between. I keep changing the title. I don't really know.
Right.
Right now, I'm kind of the title I have, and I'm probably going to change it. So anybody listening, the Gold Magnet.
The what magnet?
The Gold Magnet.
Okay.
Anyways, that'll probably change.
Well, you could call it that, and then the subtitle is how to be really, really, really awesome in life.
Yes.
There you go. That one's free.
I have a very, very good friend. His name's Dave, and we're very honest with each other, and I love it. And so I had a awesome in a subtitle and sent it to him, and I'm like, what do you think about this? And I forget what he said. He basically destroyed it and said, like, I think he used the word trite. He said awesome is trite. It means nothing. It doesn't describe anything. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. But I use that, like, that's in my vernacular. I use awesome all the time. Right. And it is a tad trite, but
it is due to its overuse, not because of the word itself,
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that I had to look up the word trite, so I think that's what it means.
Right.
I don't have the largest vocabulary in the history of the world, so.
Not yet.
Not yet. I have to read more books if I want to grow it.
Right. Well, that's not a bad thing. I mean, from all the writing of yours I've read, you don't struggle with communicating. So it's not a matter of like, you can have a big vocabulary and it means nothing. And I won't mention names, but like yesterday I was in a chat with someone on Skype who like wanted to, I don't know, correct me about something. And afterwards I was
You're a better man than me. Sorry.
Well, I was like, I had literally no idea what some of what he was saying meant, because of all the big words and things I'd never, it was doctrinal stuff, right? And I had no idea what half of what he was saying meant. And in a few moments I would ask him, what's that? And so it's like, it's one thing to have a good vocabulary. So don't beat yourself up over that. But you could have a nice vocabulary and then nobody knows what you're saying. So.
Here, I'm perfectly satisfied with my level of intelligence. Here.
You shouldn't be sometimes.
No, here's my approach, and I happen to love my approach because I always think backwards. So when I'm communicating something, I'm communicating with the other person in mind, meaning I already know what it is I'm trying to say. Like, right. I already had that understanding that hopefully it's wisdom and not just knowledge. And I take responsibility on my end for finding a way to speak it or release it. In this case, we'll say speak it or write it in a way in which the other person benefits in which they can take it and say, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah,
so,
and you're very good at that. That's why The Longest Bridge About Water is such a compelling read, is because, you know, the reader is finished reading it going, yeah, I got to do that. If he can do it, I can do this too. You know how to communicate. I don't know how much of that is you and how much of that is your editor, but
oh, dude, let me just tell you.
I'm just teasing you.
Well, no. Editors, that's like beyond putting on makeup. What I would do without an editor, I have no idea.
Right. I hear you.
And I have no shame in saying that either.
I hear you. I refuse to have my eyes be the last pair of eyes to look at something of mine of you know, if I'm going to sell it, you know, before putting it on the internet, like a book. Because I'm telling you, dude, I read stuff all the time that makes me cringe, that this person didn't feel the need to have an editor. And I'm talking about books. I can tolerate it on blogs because, you know, I'll catch errors of mine all the time after the fact.
Right.
So I have more patience I have definitely a lot of patience on Facebook. And, but like when it comes to books I paid money for, I'm just like, oh, this is why I contacted this brother to edit my stuff for me, or, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And because for me, and I talked about this on another podcast about a week ago, I'm not a person who has honed the craft of writing. I just am a communicator with a message, and writing books happens to be one of the channels of communication. So because of that, grammar and punctuation and things of that nature are just in so many ways beyond me. So you talk about Facebook. I just put commas everywhere, a hyphen, and if it looks good, then we'll just go with it. So
right. Well, because we're at the point where any moment now my wife and daughter will come home, and we've kind of transitioned into talking about your writing, talking about your book. Where can people get the Quitter's Manual from? How do people get it?
Go to my website,
which
is JeremyMangerchine.com. Would you like me to spell that? That's a long name.
If you feel it's necessary, people who go to the show notes or who see this in social media, they'll have the link. But for those listening who want to go type it in, if you want to spell your name out, that's fine.
They can find it in the show notes. JeremyMangerchine.com.
Yeah.
If you don't want to go to the show notes to find it, then you probably don't want to buy the book anyway. So that's okay. We can still be friends.
Right. And they can Google it, and Google will probably say, like, did you mean Jeremy Madagascar? And, you know, they can go there.
Yeah. It'll go straight to my website. Exactly.
And that's the other thing, is Google can help you. Like, I type words in all the time to see if Google will correct it when in doubt and spell checker's not working, you know?
Oh, I do that too. More than very, very, very often.
Right. And for those of you who've got the Fire in Your Head app, we'll be randomly sending out a push notification to give away 5 copies of both of Jeremy's books. You agreed to that, right?
Did we talk about this? No, absolutely. We talked about it, and it is my pleasure to do that.
So if you go to, right now it's in Android. Hopefully by the time this podcast goes up, Apple will have finally accepted the app. 3rd time's the charm, fingers crossed. And but those of you who have the app, make sure your notifications are on, and we'll randomly send out the link to download the first come, first serve, 5 copies of Jeremy's books. And yeah, if you're late, that's too bad. It's your book is very affordable anyway for those who do want to go get it on Amazon or get it from your site. Any last thing you want to throw out there before we hit the stop button and call this a podcast?
No, it's a pleasure to speak with you again. It's a pleasure to speak with your audience. It's always fun, and this thing is really awesome. God has rigged things in our favor, and this life that he has created for us is so amazing. And let's all just keep pressing forward in it together.
Amen. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Jeremy, for coming on.
Thanks, Steve.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. If you'd like to subscribe to the podcast, you can find us in iTunes or on Stitcher Radio, or directly at fireonyourhead.com for more options. If you want to support Steve and Lili Bremner as missionaries in Peru, or find out more about what they do, be sure to head over to their blog at stevebremner.com, or check out Steve's Kindle books on Amazon and leave reviews of the ones you liked. See you next time.